Somebody raised the question on this channel fairly recently about how to treat alexithymia. I'm going to try to address that. Thanks for tuning in. So, alexithymia, first let me define alexithymia. Alexithymia is this subclinical level, not to the point of something like Asperger's or to be on the autistic spectrum, but subclinical level of difficulty in evaluating and recognizing emotions in oneself and others. So kind of a lack of self-awareness, a lack of recognition of what's happening emotionally for other people. And so to put it on a spectrum, the opposite pole from emotional literacy. And how to treat this? That's the question. First things first, of course, you need to read the book, Healing Through the Dark Emotions, that I've alluded to probably 3,000 times on this channel. It's a great book by Miriam Greenspan. That's thing one. Thing two, you have to recognize the cultural landscape and context that we live in. The cultural landscape really is such that there's an intolerance of emotions in general. In the West, we tend to be emotion phobic. Typically more of the dark or negative emotions in general. So, for example, grief, despair, sadness, anger, all of these things are viewed with a level of suspicion and to a large extent considered negative. This harms us, I think, because when emotions are labeled negative, bad, then as a culture we tend to have less space for them and thus limited allowance of expression of these particular emotions. But they tend to be guides to where healing most needs to happen. Allow me to read a quote from the book that I mentioned earlier, where Miriam Greenspan talks about this very thing. She says, "The truth is that emotions may be pleasant or unpleasant, but they are not good or bad. The Latin root of the word emotion is movere, meaning to move. Emotions are energies that move us to feel, to express our feelings, to act. Emotional energy is neither positive nor negative. It is just energy. Only our attitude toward these emotions and what we do with the energy can be called positive or negative." So that resonates with me. That makes sense. And I see this quite a bit in my office, especially as regards trying to get off psychiatric medications. I think that in general we have an epidemic of alexithymia, partially because of our culture. Our culture teaches us that to feel is bad, to intellect, use it as a verb, I know that's not grammatically appropriate and I don't really care, to intellectualize is good. To be thinking is good. Rational, logic, that's all superior to the emotional context and landscape. Having this kind of hierarchy creates problems for us, because then when we go to feel, we're less than. Oh, I'm going down to that level of the basement, and now, we got some problems. And I see this a lot in my practice. I work with a lot of people that are trying to get off psychiatric medications. And oftentimes, when you remove the numbing effect of a psychiatric medication, there's little grid for what normal is. And so I get the phone call about someone who's experiencing something normal, but they're not sure. And they're not sure if it's normal or not because, number one, culture and society tends to tell them it's not. So that's the dominant message out there is that your emotions are bad and therefore do not feel them. And so when you experience them and allow yourself to experience them, you feel like a fish out of water. You feel like somehow it's not the right space to be in. I'm feeling this emotion. So that's problem number one, is culturally the message is, this is bad, don't do this, don't feel. Problem number two would be you're not used to feeling it. And so it feels quite foreign. It feels unfamiliar. And we don't have practice feeling our emotions. And so when you go to actually allow the anger comes out initially like a volcano, like a dam breaking, and it's overpowering. And that ends up creating problem for the person who's experiencing that and the people around them, because nobody has a grid for that. And so what happens is you go and allow yourself to experience that, and it feels incredibly foreign, and you start to question, is there something wrong with me? Oh, am I pathological? See, I'm out of control. So that's problem number two. Problem number three is, like I said, it's like a dam breaking. And so you have to recognize that initially, when emotions have been suppressed for a long time, they're going to come out more intensely at first, and then it's like it settles. It's like the pendulum of a clock swinging. So it swings from one side to the other, but then at some point it's going to come back to the middle, and it's not going to be as intense. But if you judge what happens in the beginning as how it's always going to be, then we get into problems, because then we go, clearly I'm losing it. Clearly I've lost my mind because I'm experiencing this intense emotion. I must be X, Y, or Z. I must have a problem. And then we go right back into what happened in the beginning and all along, which is to suppress our own emotions, to push them down. And that tends to be where we see the emotions becoming pathological, because what you suppress persists. It gets more energy. It grows in size, and suddenly it blows like a volcano. So that experience then with people out there in the world, ourselves included, having little experience with these emotions, it's like we're trying to learn to walk, a toddler. And we, of course, are going to stumble in the beginning. We're not going to know what to do. We're going to hit the coffee table, and feel like we should crawl. And the best thing to do is to keep getting up and trying to walk, to keep trying to be in that space and allow it. And that's where healing happens. So all of this to say, recognize this tendency of culture to try to push experiences that are emotional in general, to try to squelch those. Recognize that potential and fight back a little bit. Allow experience of your own emotions and help people understand that to feel emotions is normal. It's human. It's a good thing ultimately, because it helps us become more empathetic with other people. It helps us increase our compassion and our awareness of other people. And so in answer to the question that was raised of how to treat alexithymia, The first step is becoming reacquainted with the emotions again. You have to allow them in order to become reacquainted with them, in order to start to use labels or to try to use labels as to what this experience is. Because we're lost. We often don't know when we're experiencing something what it is we're feeling. We don't have a word for it. And part of that is we haven't been given those words, many of us, and we need to reacquaint ourselves with what those experiences are. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. If you do find this helpful, give me a thumbs up or go ahead and subscribe. Adios.